Released 5 years from today, Joker, directed by Todd Phillips, is a riveting, dark psychological thriller that tells a unique origin story about one of the most iconic villains in comic book history. While most people think of Marvel nowadays when it comes to comic book films, Joker, set in the fictional Gotham City of the DC Universe, became the most profitable comic book based movie despite being R rated. Released in 2019, the film showed a dark and gritty portrayal of Arthur Fleck, a failed comedian descending into madness within crime ridden Gotham City. It also offered a thought provoking exploration on themes of mental illness, societal decay, and the consequences of neglect. The film earned 11 Oscar nominations in 2020, including for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Cinematography. Joker was Todd Phillips' sixth collaboration with cinematographer Lawrence Sher, and Phillips called it the most uncompromised thing we've done to date. While the Joker is known as a psychopathic criminal mastermind, Todd wanted to make a very different kind of movie about the character, one that showed his internal strife before his murderous actions, as well as the effect society had on his descent. And of course, lighting and color played a huge visual role in showcasing this character's light and dark side. Todd and Lawrence originally wanted to shoot on large format film because they felt that the story called for being shot on film. However, because of the scale of the movie, they weren't able to follow through on this for budget reasons. Instead, they ended up shooting digitally with a specifically crafted LUT to make this image as film-like as possible. They worked with the colorist and her father to engineer a LUT that emulated the exact type of codec stock they wanted. Shooting digitally also allowed them to shoot with less light in some cases. The main role that Lawrence played by in Joker was focusing on lighting the spaces rather than the faces. This is because they wanted to give Joaquin Phoenix, the actor for Arthur, as much physical freedom to do or move however he wanted to, and they didn't want the technical aspect to interfere with his performance. Most of Joaquin's performance would be a surprise as there were very little rehearsals, so the director and DOP never really knew where or how he was going to move. For example, in the nonverbal bathroom dancing scene, Lawrence lit the space very intentionally in order to give a 360 ability for Joaquin to move in any direction, and the camera could quite literally dance around him. This also included the heavy use of practical lights throughout almost every scene to help with that 360-degree ability. Lawrence also worked with Todd to make the subway fight scene as fever dream-like as possible, so they opted for LEDs. They also needed complete control over the lights to make them flicker and change at will, as well as control over what the outside of the windows looked like. They achieved this by setting up 15-foot screens spread out across 70 feet on either side, and basically created a mock-up of what a moving subway would look like to play on the screens. This included about 6 different layers, including a fluorescent light, hanging tungsten light, cyan, and sodium vapor. Lawrence was also really careful to choose lights specifically to recreate that 1980s look, especially when it came to the Murphy talk show. They wanted to make it look like other old talk shows and be as realistic as possible, so instead of LEDs, they chose old tungsten units that would have actually been used back then. Most of the film was shot in New York City, so Lawrence decided to light Gotham to look like New York from the late 70s and 80s. And a big part of cities back then were these orange-green sodium vapor street lights that make up such a huge part of the lighting in this film. So they really embraced these lights to also ignite people's memories of a grim 1980s city. On the other hand, they used warm tungsten lights within Arthur's home to create a more comforting feel that contrasted the dread of the outside city. Color also played a huge role in telling the story of Joker. As Lawrence Sher put it, Joker is a movie about opposite ends of the spectrum or two sides of yourself, the shadow and the light. So contrasting colors were really important to show what's going on internally with Arthur. Throughout the movie, there is a consistent color contrast between these vibrant oranges and these greens and teals. It's basically a palette of normal colors you see emitted from everyday lights, but more amplified. The color also changes as Arthur's character changes. They become more vibrant and noticeable as he finds himself and embraces his dark side. There is also always some hint of green within the cinematography. This is because fluorescent lights in the 80s always had a green spike, so they added a green filter to the fluorescent lights in most cases to keep true to that 80s look. However, in a scene like the kitchen, he would just use them uncorrected for their natural cyan hint. Another main use of color in Joker was to help create depth within a scene. When you have one prominent color, like orange or a greenish teal, paired with a background or fill light of the opposite color, this helps create separation. Joker does this perfectly because the sodium vapor lights create separation of space when paired with the uncorrected cyan blue. Lawrence also shot at dusk or magic hour often, such as in the storefront scene. This is because it's the only time of day when the air is lit with an ambient blue light, which creates a natural contrast with the warmer streetlights, storefronts, and fluorescent lights. Todd Phillips' Joker, alongside DOP Lawrence Sher, captivated audiences with its dark narrative and innovative visual storytelling, along with its meticulous lighting and color choices. The film immersed viewers in the gritty world of Gotham City. It remains a modern classic, pushing the boundaries of the comic book genre and leaving a lasting impact on filmmaking.